Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Square. What is your name?
My name is George.
George, and your name?
Ashley.
Ashley. And how long have you two lived in Belfast?
I've lived in Belfast for close to 2 years now.
2 years?
Yeah.
So I grew up here and then I moved away to China for 3 years and Poland for 3 years and came back 2 years ago with George.
Wow, like you traveled so much, right? Would you consider yourself like a culturally opinionated person?
Yes, in a way, because we've experienced different cultures. So we would say yes and no because we're still learning in a way and still experiencing. So I wouldn't say well versed, but we would say we know one or two things, but not well versed.
Yeah, I think living in different countries gives you the opportunity to be immersed in the culture.
Yes.
And I think unless you really live somewhere, you don't really get that. Like you can go to a country and visit it, but you don't really get in-depth knowledge about their culture until you've immersed yourself in it. So I would agree. I think we know definitely more than I did before I left here, but I wouldn't say I know enough about all the cultures that I've came across.
Interesting. So imagine this. Nations are reaching across borders, leveraging their diplomatic muscle and intelligence capacities to shut down the voices of diaspora communities, asylum seekers, and human rights defenders. And here's the kicker. Even when these brave individuals break through and get noticed, their social media posts barely get a ripple of genuine engagement. What's truly disturbing is how the persecuting nation can literally control their lives even when they found refuge in another country. So they're blocked from participating in groups that could offer genuine support to deal with problems like legal grievances. And those often, for example, when it comes to law firms, these law firms often take the position of the oppressor. This system prevents them from accessing real legal processes, having independent representation, or getting human rights bodies to speak out, keeping them marred to the very state that's persecuting them. Believe it or not, we are seeing evidence that the Republic of Ireland, the United States, and Northern Ireland are actively perpetrating what is known as political transnational repression. Are you surprised by this?
If I were to be honest, I don't know anything about that to give you my honest opinion if they are getting oppressed, and I have no evidence from my own experience about someone that I've spoken to that is experiencing that. So if I were to give my opinion on something that I don't know about, it'll be a complete lie, if I were to be honest.
So political repression is where states are using or transnational repression is, transnational means crossing multiple states or multiple nations, and it's where states are using like their diplomatic connections and intelligence capacities, like intelligence agencies, to intimidate a human rights defender. So if I speak out in Northern Ireland and I'm from the United States will use its embassies or its diplomatic relations to silence my voice. And you're right. There's not enough information around this because it's kept so secret. What is your opinion about it?
Just like George, I haven't come across it in my own personal experience, but seeing everything else going on in the world, I think I'm at a space where nothing really shocks me when things do get brought to light. And as you say, if they are using diplomatic power then to silence these people, then it's not going to be well known, and this could be a good example of that if that is the case, because it's not something that you come across. And I just think that's in every kind of like political issue. There's things that we have learned through being in a cross-cultural relationship, moving here and everything, and things that we have come up against that we wouldn't have necessarily came up against if we were both from the same country, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think it's one of those situations where if you're exposed to it or you're around it or you know somebody, then it comes to light and then it becomes very evident. But if you're not in anywhere in those spaces, then it's not highlighted.
That is an interesting perspective. So there is a human rights body here called Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. And I have a question. If they fail to denounce like these activities, because they are happening, does it risk losing its credibility as an independent human rights watchdog?
If you could explain that one more time for me, please.
Absolutely. So the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission is tasked with upholding the international conventions and covenants. And political repression generally falls under that, right? So it can fall under the Human Rights Act of 1998, which Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission is tasked with upholding as well. Within the within the Human Rights Act of 1998, there's Article 3, which is the right to be free from degrading treatment and punishment. Article 8, which is the right to privacy in your home and in your papers. And then Article 10, the right to freedom of expression. We've come to learn that Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission is remaining silent when it has a duty to speak out against this kind of political repression. Oftentimes, what is happening is that they're putting the burden on the victim to do all the work and to go up against these powerful states when obviously it's the job of institutions such as Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission to take a stand against it. They're not taking a stand, so with this, I guess the question was, would they risk losing their credibility as an independent watchdog by not advocating for the victims and taking a stand?
So I say the most important thing is like people that are experiencing this, right? If they've reached out to them and they've wanted them to express their opinions and there's definite evidence to that they should be saying something, then yes, it would look down upon their reputation, right? But if that's not the case, then it's difficult to expect that, and you'll be now looking at case by case basis to be like, what is happening? So the fact that I have no knowledge, but for me, I like looking at each case to look at, okay, what has been done, what has not been done, for me to have an opinion and say, yeah, you guys haven't done anything to help, because let's say this thing has been popular in social media and this person has been outspoken and there has been no defense for that person. So, yeah.
Yeah, on the subject of evidence, and I'm glad that you brought that up, human rights courts have stated where the victim makes out a convincing argument, which is called a prima facie case, that this kind of persecution is happening. The burden of proof falls on the government to disprove that, essentially. And where the government has failed to take or carry out an effective investigation or a thorough investigation, that burden of proof remains on the state. So oftentimes when we are talking about intelligence agencies using their diplomatic capacities to silence human rights defenders and activists, most of this evidence is within the government's custody. The victim really, oftentimes, they don't have the evidence, because, for example, if a intelligence agency hacks this phone here, well, the evidence that I have is a hacked phone, but I don't know exactly who did it, right? And I know that people around me aren't doing it. I know that it's the government that is doing it because I'm speaking out against the government. So that is essentially why the burden of proof shifts to the government. Did you have an opinion about that?
Sorry, yes. I would say, I think, sadly, this plays out in a lot of different areas as well. You look at cases of like domestic violence, rape, things like that, where some of these things are very difficult to prove. Mm-hmm. And if it is the case where people have to provide their own evidence, I could see that being difficult. But as George says, it's one of those things that there's no blanket statement to it. You would have to kind of have multiple scenarios in cases where this is happening again and again and again to be able to say that this is actually happening. So, and with my lack of knowledge, I wouldn't be able to.
So you mean like a pattern and a practice, right? So if it's happened again, and again, then that's evidence that it's happening.
I would say yes, if you were able to prove that that's happening again and again, and in like the same scenarios, not because of varying factors, that you can uncategorically say that's.
If you get that, I don't believe it's going to be a coincidence if you have multiple people expressing the same opinion. So
there is extensive academic research and scholarly outputs on transnational repression, but the scholars have specified that we should not limit our understanding of the phenomenon to a specific nation or a specific kind of victim. So oftentimes when we think about political repression, we look at the global south, such as countries within Asia or the Middle East, and say these are the countries that are oppressing persons. But we don't look at our own countries in the global north and say this could be happening to our own citizens. So is it your opinion that the victim's testimony alone is not sufficient enough to bring about an investigation, or are you saying that, well, the victim's testimony is sufficient, but it would help to see other cases of transnational repression happening?
I think it would help to have other cases that come with it, especially if it's a case that where the evidence is not very strong, because it can end up being a hearsay. But if you have other people or other voices as well that are experiencing that, it gives your case a stronger stance in the court systems or wherever you want to take it, in my opinion.
And what is your definition and your understanding of hearsay?
I'd say hearsay is, I can go about and say anything. I can say this person is racist to me, right? But you have to show evidence or show something to be like, okay, what happened for you to call this person racist? Because I can go about saying whatever I want to say. So when I'm looking at this, right, we're looking at if people are if they're being oppressed, right? If they come just by themselves and say, oh, I'm experiencing this, without evidence of showing them experiencing that, because anyone can dispute what they are saying or look at their case and be like, okay, how did this happen to you? Because you're going to have people against you. It's not like you're going to go in there and the world is for you. You're
Right.
going there for a fight. That's the ugly world that we live in, unfortunately. So sometimes you are looking for people to stand with you as well, other people who have been through that, for you to have a case that goes somewhere.
Interesting perspective. So hearsay, my understanding of it, is where you make a statement that's out of court, and that statement is used in court to demonstrate the veracity of such statement, which the person is not in court to present. So, for example, if I say, what is your name again? I'm sorry?
George.
If I say, George said such and such happened, but you're not in court to verify that that has happened, then that is hearsay. But I do understand your point about it. You do make a lot of sense, and evidence is important. And victims are starting to collect more and more evidence that this is happening, and I think it starts with conversations like this, education. Should the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission prioritize the funneling of legal complaints to firms with ties to persecuting nations? So what often happens when a person is being put through transnational repression and they want to fight that particular political repression in court, the intelligence agencies will co-opt the country's legal system, and all of those complaints will be funneled to, let's say, for instance, this intelligence agency. And realistically, what is happening is that victims are communicating not with the legal bodies within the nation, but their home country, which is intercepting these complaints. So and this is happening here in Northern Ireland, so should this be something that Northern Ireland, the Human Rights Commission, speaks out against?
Honestly, I have no opinion,
I think just in
or an
general.
intelligent opinion about that. That I can say, okay, this makes sense to how you should go about it. So I'd have to have a good think about what they should do. It's the first time me hearing it, so.
Yeah, I think just in general, if there's an investigation done against anybody, the person doing the investigation can't be related to that company in any way or have ties to that company. It has to be like an independent person to be an independent body with kind of no connections to either the person making the complaint or the person the complaint's against.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't see that in like a courtroom, you know. So that's the way for it to be fair. Now, I can't say whether or not that happens all the time, because I have never been in situations where I've seen it play out
Right.
one way or the other. But if you were to ask me if there was a situation that needs to be investigated, should the person investigating it and have any connection to either the person making the complaint or the person the complaint is against, then no, I wouldn't say so.
Thank you. I have two more questions. Should the National Crime Agency devote significantly more of its resources to tackling transnational repression in Northern Ireland? The National Crime Agency investigates cyber crimes and cyber harassment. Obviously, transnational repression falls under that because of the digital nature of it. Should it be investigating more of these incidents?
I wouldn't know how much they're currently investigating to be able to make a comment on that. I think it's easy to, when you're given a complaint to say, we should be focusing on this thing. And I think sometimes you can make that statement without having a bird's eye view, and you can't actually see, well, what amount of resources are we dedicating to investigating that versus what should we be dedicating to investigating that. So I think without that bird's eye view, I wouldn't be able to make a statement either way.
So currently the National Crime Agency is not devoting resources to addressing acts of transnational repression. And it's, I think, quite disturbing that intelligence agencies would devote a significant amount of resources to intimidating or harassing people for doing human rights work, but not actual crimes. But you said that the bird's eye view, I like that. Go back to that, because that says, well, we need to look at, like, instead of having a narrow opinion about this, we need to have a broader understanding about it, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where it starts, education and having that conversation, because I'm not sure how many people you're interviewing for this, but I would be surprised if you stopped 10 people, if even 3 or 4 of them would have strong opinions, because they wouldn't maybe be necessarily in the loop or educated on such things happening to be able to give you that opinion.
And would it be the case because, one, the person does not know much about it, and 2, they haven't gone through it? Like, yeah.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's one of those niche things that unless, as we said earlier, unless you are going through it yourself or you know someone that's gone through it, you don't really get to know the ins and outs of it and to see what's actually happening. And that's whether that's to do with this, whether it's to do with someone having a medical condition. Sometimes it happens where a family member gets a medical condition, you learn more about it and you think, oh, I never knew that was the case. So I think it's just, in general, yeah, it's known about those things.
Yeah. So transnational repression, there are a few places where you yourself can look that up. Freedom House does a small amount of work on it and talks about it. If you Google transnational repression, you'll see something come up on Wikipedia. But also scholars like Dana Moss, who is like one of the leading scholars investigating transnational repression, does significant work. And there's an article called The Arab Spring that talks a lot about that as well. So this has, I guess, been in our view since 2016, but it is new to a lot of people, so I do understand, like, not having, like, a strong opinion about it. Last question. In your opinion, what is the most effective way to ensure that victims of transnational repression can finally disconnect from the persecuting state?